What if I told you that your mind is your own worst enemy? Every single day you wake up, and within minutes, the spiral begins. What if this happens? What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if everything falls apart? Sound familiar? You're not alone. Millions of people are trapped in the prison of their own thoughts, drowning in worry, suffocating in overthinking, living in a constant state of mental chaos. But here's the truth that nobody wants to tell you. The ancient Stoics figured this out over 2,000 years ago, long before anxiety became a billion-dollar industry, long before endless self-help books promised quick fixes that never work. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, battled his own mind every single day. Seneca, one of Rome's greatest philosophers, wrestled with worry and found the antidote. Epictetus, who went from slave to sage, discovered the secret to mental freedom. These weren't just philosophers sitting in ivory towers. These were real people facing real problems, real fears, real uncertainty, and they developed a system so powerful, so practical, that it still works today when nothing else will. But here's what's different about this video. I'm not going to give you surface-level advice or motivational fluff. I'm going to share 8 ancient Stoic habits that will literally rewire your brain, end the cycle of worry and overthinking, and give you the kind of mental clarity that most people only dream about. These aren't just ideas. These are battle-tested strategies that have helped people survive wars, loss, betrayal, and every form of human suffering imaginable. Before we dive in, I need you to do something right now. If you're serious about transforming your mental state, like this video immediately. Don't wait. Don't think about it. Just do it. Drop a comment as we go through each habit, especially when something hits you hard. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message. And most importantly, don't skip any part, because even one missed habit could be the key that unlocks your mental freedom. This isn't background noise while you scroll your phone. This is your wake-up call. Let's begin. Habit number 1. Practice the discipline of morning reflection. Here's what most people do wrong. They wake up and immediately check their phone, flood their mind with news, social media, other people's problems, other people's drama. By the time they're fully awake, their mind is already scattered, already reactive, already spinning with thoughts they can't control. The Stoics did the exact opposite. They understood that how you start your day determines everything that follows. Marcus Aurelius didn't roll out of bed and immediately start dealing with the Roman Empire. He spent time with his thoughts first. He wrote in his journal, which became the book we know as Meditations, not because he wanted to be published, but because he needed to organize his mind before facing the chaos of leadership. Every morning he would remind himself of fundamental truths. Today I will meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. But I won't be surprised or disturbed, for I can't imagine a world without such people. That's not pessimism, that's preparation, that's mental armor. When you expect difficulty, when you prepare your mind for challenge, nothing can shake you. Most people get blindsided by problems because they live in fantasy. They expect everything to go smoothly. The Stoic expects turbulence and stays calm in the storm. Here's what morning reflection actually looks like. Before you touch your phone, before you check emails, before you dive into the day's demands, you sit with yourself for just 10 minutes. You ask 3 simple questions. What can I control today? What challenges might I face? How can I respond with wisdom instead of emotion? That's it. 3 questions that ground you in reality and prepare your mind for whatever comes. But here's the deeper truth. Morning reflection isn't just about planning your day. It's about reconnecting with who you are beneath all the noise. When you start your day in quiet contemplation, you remember that you are not your thoughts. You are not your worries. You are not your fears. You are the observer of these mental events, and observers have power that participants don't have. Try this tomorrow morning. Set your alarm 10 minutes earlier. Don't check your phone. Sit quietly and ask yourself those 3 questions. Write down your answers if that helps. You'll be amazed at how this simple practice creates a buffer between you and the chaos of daily life. You'll stop reacting to everything and start responding with intention. Habit number 2. Master the art of present moment awareness. The mind that worries is never in the present moment. Think about it. Worry is always about the future. What if this happens? What if that goes wrong? Overthinking is usually about the past. Why did I say that? What could I have done differently? But life only happens in the present. The present is the only place where you have any real power. Epictetus taught something profound. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. But most people give their power away by living everywhere except right now. They live in imaginary futures full of imaginary problems. They live in replayed pasts full of regret and resentment. Meanwhile, the present moment, where all their actual power exists, slips by unnoticed. The Stoics developed a practice they called prosotio, continuous attention to the present moment, not meditation in the way we think of it today, sitting cross-legged with eyes closed. This was active awareness during daily life. When walking, be fully present to walking. When eating, be fully present to eating. When talking to someone, be completely there with them, not planning what you'll say next or thinking about something else entirely. Here's why this works so powerfully against worry and overthinking. When you're fully present, you realize that right now, in this exact moment, you're probably okay. Not perfect, not without challenges, but okay. The crisis exists in your imagination about the future or your rumination about the past. But right now, right here, you can breathe. You can think. You can choose your next action. Most anxiety dissolves when you come back to the present because you realize the emergency you were worried about isn't actually happening. It's a story your mind is telling you about what might happen. But stories aren't reality. This moment is reality. And in this moment, you have options. You have choices. You have power. Practice this throughout your day. When you catch your mind wandering into worry or overthinking, gently bring it back to what's actually happening right now. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? This isn't escaping from your problems. This is grounding yourself so you can deal with actual problems instead of imaginary ones. Habit number 3. Embrace the dichotomy of control. This might be the most important Stoic concept you'll ever learn. It's certainly the most practical. The dichotomy of control is simple in theory, but revolutionary in practice. There are things you can control and things you cannot control. Your peace of mind depends entirely on focusing your energy only on what you can control and accepting what you cannot. Epictetus said it perfectly. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, position, and in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. Let that sink in. Most of what you worry about falls into the category of things you cannot control. Other people's opinions, the weather, the economy, traffic, what happened in the past, what might happen in the future, the outcome of your efforts. Whether people like you, how long you'll live, whether you'll get sick. All of these things are outside your direct control. But here's what you can control: your thoughts, your responses, your choices, your effort, your values, how you treat others, what you focus on, how you interpret events, your daily habits. These are your domains of power. This is where your energy belongs. The reason most people are anxious and overwhelmed is because they're trying to control the uncontrollable while neglecting what they can actually influence. They worry about whether they'll get the job instead of focusing on preparing for the interview. They stress about whether people will like their work instead of focusing on doing their best work. They panic about potential problems instead of taking action on current opportunities. Here's a simple exercise that will change your life. Take any worry or source of stress you're dealing with right now. Write it down. Then ask yourself this question: is this within my control or outside my control? If it's outside your control, practice letting it go. Not because you don't care, but because worrying about it won't change it and will only drain your energy. If it's within your control, make a plan and take action. This isn't about becoming passive or indifferent. It's about becoming strategically focused. When you stop wasting energy on what you can't control, you have much more energy for what you can control. And that's where real change happens. That's where real power lives. The Stoics weren't trying to control outcomes. They were trying to control their responses to outcomes. They knew that life would bring challenges, setbacks, disappointments, but they also knew that their character, their values, their choices, these things remained in their power, no matter what external circumstances they faced. Habit number 4, practice negative visualization without becoming negative. This sounds counterintuitive, but stick with me. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is called premeditatio malorum, which means the premeditation of evils. Before you think this is about being pessimistic or attracting negative energy, let me explain what this actually is and why it works so brilliantly. Negative visualization is the practice of imagining loss, setback, or difficulty, not to manifest these things, but to prepare your mind and appreciate what you have. It's mental rehearsal for adversity. It's building emotional resilience before you need it. It's the difference between being blindsided by problems and being ready for them. Seneca practiced this regularly. He would imagine losing his wealth, his status, his health, even his loved ones, not because he wanted these things to happen, but because he knew that attachment and the fear of loss were sources of suffering. When you mentally rehearse loss, you realize 2 things. First, you could survive it. Second, what you have right now is precious and shouldn't be taken for granted. Think about it this way. Athletes don't just practice when everything goes perfectly. They practice dealing with mistakes, pressure, unexpected situations. Soldiers don't just train in ideal conditions. They train for chaos, for when plans fall apart, for when everything goes wrong. The same principle applies to mental training. Most people avoid thinking about potential problems because they believe it will make them anxious or attract bad things. But the opposite is true. When you never mentally prepare for difficulty, every setback feels like a catastrophe. When you practice negative visualization correctly, challenges become manageable because you've already faced them in your mind. Here's how to do this without becoming depressed or paranoid. Once a week, spend 5 minutes imagining losing something you value. Your job, your health, your relationship, your home. But don't stop at the loss. Visualize how you would respond. What would you do next? How would you rebuild? What strengths would you draw upon? What would you learn from the experience? This isn't about expecting the worst. It's about knowing you could handle the worst. There's a massive difference between those two mindsets. When you know you could survive and even thrive after loss, you stop living in fear of loss. You start living with confidence and gratitude. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He understood that everything in life is temporary. Your current problems are temporary. Your current blessings are temporary. When you truly accept this impermanence, you stop clinging so desperately to things you can't permanently keep anyway. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you practice letting go mentally, you often get to keep things longer. When you're not desperately attached, you're not constantly worried about loss. You can actually enjoy what you have, instead of always fearing its absence. This is how you break the cycle of anxious attachment that keeps so many people trapped in mental suffering. Try this tonight before bed. Think of 3 things you're grateful for. Then imagine losing each one. Feel the loss for a moment. Then imagine how you would continue living, what you would do next, how you would find meaning and purpose again. Notice that even in imagined loss, you still exist. You still have choices. You still have the capacity to create value and find joy. Habit number 5. Develop the practice of evening reflection. If morning reflection prepares your mind for the day, evening reflection processes what happened and extracts wisdom from experience. The Stoics believed that an unexamined day was a wasted day, not because every moment had to be profound, but because every experience contained lessons if you were willing to look for them. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius describing this practice. When the lamp is taken away and my wife has fallen silent, I examine the whole day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. For why should I fear any consequence from my mistakes when I can say, watch out that you don't do it again, but now I forgive you. This isn't about judging yourself harshly or dwelling on mistakes. It's about honest self-assessment without self-attack. It's about learning from what happened so you can respond better next time. Most people repeat the same mental patterns because they never pause to examine them. Here's what evening reflection looks like in practice. Before you go to sleep, ask yourself 3 questions. What did I do well today? What could I have handled better? What did I learn about myself or life? Spend just 5 minutes thinking about these questions. Don't write a novel, just honest, brief reflection. But here's the deeper purpose. Evening reflection breaks the cycle of unconscious living. Most people stumble through their days on autopilot, reacting to events without learning from them. They make the same mistakes over and over because they never pause to understand why they're making them. When you examine your day, you start to notice patterns. You realize that you always get anxious in certain situations. You see that you overthink when you're tired or hungry. You recognize that you worry most when you're not taking action on your goals. These insights give you power because you can't change what you're not aware of. The evening reflection also helps you appreciate progress that you might otherwise miss. When you're constantly focused on what's wrong or what needs to improve, you forget to acknowledge what's going right. This practice helps you see both clearly. Problems to address and progress to celebrate. Most importantly, evening reflection helps you forgive yourself for being human. The Stoics weren't trying to be perfect. They were trying to be better. They knew they would make mistakes, have bad days, fall short of their ideals sometimes. But they also knew that each day was a new opportunity to practice wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. When you end each day with reflection instead of distraction, you're training your mind to extract value from experience. You're building the habit of learning from life instead of just enduring it. This transforms how you see challenges. Instead of things that happen to you, they become things that teach you. Habit number 6, practice the discipline of desire by wanting what happens. This is probably the most radical Stoic concept, and it's the one that has the power to eliminate suffering at its root. Most of our mental anguish comes from wanting reality to be different than Inder. We want our past to be different. It is. We want the traffic to move faster. We want people to be K. But reality doesn't conform to our preferences. We want our future to be certain. Epictetus taught something that sounds impossible at first, don, and that resistance creates endless suffering. That demand that things happen as you wish. Instead, wish that they happen as they do, and you will do well. This isn't about becoming passive or giving up on goals. It's about ending the war between your expectations and reality. Think about how much energy you waste being angry that things aren't the way you want them to be. You're stuck in traffic, and you're furious because you want to be moving. Someone treats you rudely, and you're outraged because you want them to be respectful. Your project fails, and you're devastated because you want it to succeed. All of that emotional turbulence comes from demanding that reality be different than it is. But what if you could train yourself to want what actually happens? Not because you're giving up on influence or improvement, but because you're choosing peace over resistance. What if you could be stuck in traffic and think, this is exactly what should be happening right now, because this is what is happening? What if you could face failure and think, this setback is teaching me something valuable that I couldn't learn any other way? This doesn't mean you become a doormat or stop working toward goals. It means you stop adding unnecessary suffering to unavoidable pain. Pain is what happens when life doesn't go according to plan. Suffering is what happens when you resist that pain and demand that life should be different. Here's how to practice this gradually. Start with small inconveniences. When you're waiting in a long line, instead of getting frustrated, try thinking, this waiting is exactly what I need right now. Maybe it's teaching me patience. Maybe it's giving me time to think. Maybe it's slowing me down for a reason I don't understand yet. When someone cancels plans, instead of being disappointed, try thinking, this change of plans is perfect. Maybe I needed this free time. Maybe something better will come from this. Maybe this is protecting me from something I can't see. This isn't about lying to yourself or pretending everything is wonderful. It's about choosing acceptance over resistance. It's about working with reality instead of against it. The Stoics understood that we suffer not because of what happens to us, but because of our judgments about what happens to us. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal, and personal loss. But he wrote, confine yourself to the present. He knew that suffering came not from events themselves, but from his resistance to events. When he stopped demanding that life be different and started accepting what life brought him, he found peace, even in the midst of chaos. This practice transforms worry and overthinking because both of these mental habits are forms of resistance. Worry is resisting uncertainty about the future. Overthinking is resisting acceptance of what happened in the past. When you train yourself to want what happens, both worry and overthinking lose their grip on your mind. Habit number 7. Cultivate philosophical becoming. Emote detachment without emotionally cold. This is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Stoicism. People think that being detached means not caring, not feeling, becoming robotic or indifferent. That's not what the Stoics taught at all. They taught passionate engagement with life combined with emotional non-attachment to outcomes. The difference is crucial. You can care deeply about your work without being devastated if it doesn't succeed. You can love someone completely without being destroyed if they leave. You can pursue goals with full effort without being crushed if you don't achieve them. This is the balance the Stoics were trying to achieve. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, but he practiced voluntary discomfort regularly to remind himself that his happiness didn't depend on his wealth. He loved his friends deeply, but he also accepted that he might lose them. He engaged fully in political life, but he didn't let political outcomes determine his inner peace. This kind of detachment is actually what allows you to love more freely and work more effectively. When you're not desperately attached to specific outcomes, you're not paralyzed by the fear of loss. You can take risks because failure won't destroy you. You can love openly because rejection won't devastate you. Here's what philosophical detachment looks like in daily life. You do your best work not because you need it to be praised, but because excellence is your standard. You treat people kindly not because you need them to like you, but because kindness is your character. You pursue your goals not because you need them to work out perfectly, but because the pursuit itself is meaningful. This detachment is what breaks the cycle of overthinking. Most overthinking comes from being too attached to how things should go. You replay conversations because you're attached to being understood. You worry about future events because you're attached to them going a certain way. When you can care without clinging, engage without attachment, your mind becomes naturally more peaceful. The Stoics called this state ataraxia, which means unperturbedness or tranquility. It's not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of emotional stability that doesn't depend on external circumstances. You can feel joy without needing it to last forever. You can feel sadness without being overwhelmed by it. You can face uncertainty without being paralyzed by it. Practice this by paying attention to your attachments. Notice when you're not just wanting something, but needing it to happen for you to be okay. Notice when you're not just disappointed by an outcome, but devastated by it. These are signs of unhealthy attachment. The goal isn't to stop caring. The goal is to care without your well-being depending on specific outcomes. Habit number 8. Transform obstacles into stepping stones through reframing. This final habit might be the most powerful of all because it completely changes how you see problems, setbacks, and challenges. Instead of seeing obstacles as things that block your path, you learn to see them as the path itself. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that something is wrong, you see them as opportunities to grow stronger. Marcus Aurelius wrote what might be the most famous line in all of Impediment to Action advances action. What Stoic literature? The stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't just inspirational rhetoric. This is a practical method for transforming your relationship with difficulty. Think about it. Every skill you've developed came from overcoming obstacles. You learned to walk by falling down repeatedly. You learned to read by struggling with letters and words. You developed emotional maturity by working through conflicts and disappointments. The obstacles weren't preventing your growth. They were causing your growth. But somewhere along the way, many people lose this perspective. They start seeing challenges as problems instead of training. They start seeing setbacks as failures instead of feedback. They start seeing difficulties as evidence that they're on the wrong path instead of proof that they're building strength. The Stoic practice of obstacle as path reframes every difficulty as an opportunity. Lost your job? Now you have the opportunity to find work that's better aligned with your values. Relationship ended. Now you have the opportunity to grow more complete as an individual. Health problems. Now you have the opportunity to develop courage and appreciate what you took for granted. This isn't about pretending that difficult things are easy or pleasant. It's about finding the hidden gift in every challenge. There's always something to learn, some way to grow, some strength to develop, some wisdom to gain. When you train your mind to look for these opportunities, you stop being a victim of circumstances and start being a student of life. Here's how to practice this reframing. Whenever you face a problem or obstacle, ask yourself these questions. What is this situation trying to teach me? How can this challenge make me stronger? What opportunities might be hidden in this difficulty? What would I tell a friend who was facing this same situation? The last question is particularly powerful because we're often much more compassionate and wise when advising others than when dealing with our own problems. We can see opportunities in other people's challenges that we miss in our own. This practice helps you become your own wise advisor. This reframing doesn't just help you deal with current problems better. It fundamentally changes how you see future challenges. Instead of dreading difficulty, you start to see it as necessary for growth. Instead of trying to avoid all problems, you start to see them as the price of an interesting life. Instead of seeing yourself as unlucky when things go wrong, you start to see yourself as being strengthened for something greater. When you truly understand that obstacles are the path, worry and overthinking begin to dissolve because you're no longer fighting against reality. You're working with it. You're not asking why this happened to you. You're asking how this will make you better. That shift in perspective is the difference between mental suffering and mental strength. The ancient Stoics lived through plagues, wars, exile, and loss. They didn't have therapists or anxiety medications or self-help podcasts. What they had was a philosophy so practical, so powerful, that it could transform any human experience into wisdom. They understood something that modern psychology is just beginning to rediscover. You can't control what happens to you, but you have complete control over what you make it mean. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to implement all 8 of these habits at once. They read about morning reflection, present moment awareness, the dichotomy of control, negative visualization, evening reflection, disciplined desire, philosophical detachment, and obstacle reframing, and they think they need to master everything immediately. That's a recipe for failure and frustration. The Stoics were practitioners, not perfectionists. They knew that wisdom was developed gradually through consistent practice, not achieved overnight through intense effort. They understood that building mental strength was like building physical strength. You start where you are, you progress slowly, and you focus on consistency over intensity. So here's what I want you to do. Don't try to implement all 8 habits tomorrow. Pick one, just one. The one that resonates most strongly with you right now. Maybe it's morning reflection because you always start your day scattered and reactive. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control because you're constantly stressed about things you can't influence. Maybe it's negative visualization because you're living in fear of loss. Whatever habit you choose, commit to practicing it for just 1 week. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, just consistently. Set a reminder on your phone. Write yourself a note. Tell someone what you're doing so they can help you remember. Make it as simple as possible to succeed and as hard as possible to fail. Here's what will happen during that first week. Your mind will resist. It will tell you this is stupid, that it's not working, that you don't have time, that you should try something else instead. That resistance is normal. It's not evidence that the practice isn't working. It's evidence that your mind is used to its current patterns and doesn't want to change them. The Stoics understood this resistance. Epictetus taught his students that the mind would fight against new ways of thinking, just like the body fights against new physical training. The soreness you feel when you start exercising isn't a sign that exercise is bad for you. It's a sign that your muscles are adapting and growing stronger. Mental resistance works the same way. Push through the resistance, not with force or self-criticism, but with gentle persistence. When you forget to practice your chosen habit, don't judge yourself. Just start again. When your mind tells you it's not working, remind yourself that transformation takes time. When you feel like giving up, remember why you started watching this video in the first place. After 1 week of consistent practice with one habit, something interesting will happen. That habit will start to feel more natural. Your mind will begin to adapt. You'll notice small changes in how you respond to stress, uncertainty, or challenge. You'll catch yourself applying Stoic principles automatically, without thinking about it. That's when you're ready to add a second habit. Not before. The biggest mistake people make is trying to change everything at once and changing nothing as a result. The Stoics built their philosophy gradually, principle by principle, practice by practice. They understood that lasting transformation comes from small, consistent changes compounded over time. But there's something deeper happening when you practice these habits. You're not just changing your behavior. You're changing your identity. You're becoming someone who reflects instead of reacts. Someone who focuses on what they can control instead of worrying about what they can't. Someone who finds opportunity in obstacles instead of being defeated by them. This identity shift is what makes Stoicism so powerful. You're not just applying techniques. You're becoming a different kind of person. A person who remains calm under pressure. A person who thinks clearly in chaos. A person who finds peace in uncertainty. This isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming cold. It's about developing the kind of inner strength that nothing external can shake. Marcus Aurelius faced the Antonine Plague, which killed millions of people across the Roman Empire. He dealt with military campaigns, political betrayals, and personal losses. Yet he wrote in his private journal, "Confine yourself to the present." He found peace not by avoiding difficulty, but by developing the mental discipline to stay grounded, regardless of external circumstances. Seneca was exiled from Rome, lost his wealth multiple times, and eventually faced execution. But he wrote some of the most profound insights about human nature and mental freedom. His peace didn't depend on his circumstances being perfect. It depended on his mind being disciplined. Epictetus was literally a slave for much of his life, yet he became one of the most influential teachers of mental freedom in human history. His chains couldn't imprison his thoughts. His circumstances couldn't control his character. He understood that true freedom isn't about external conditions. It's about internal mastery. These weren't extraordinary people with supernatural abilities. They were human beings who developed extraordinary mental habits. They faced the same fundamental challenges you face. Uncertainty about the future, regret about the past, pressure in the present. The difference is that they trained their minds to respond to these challenges with wisdom instead of worry, with clarity instead of confusion. You have access to the same training, the same practices, the same principles. The question isn't whether these habits work. History has proven that they do. The question is whether you'll commit to practicing them long enough to experience their power in your own life. But let me be honest with you about something. These habits will not eliminate all difficulty from your life. They won't prevent loss, failure, rejection, or disappointment. What they will do is transform your relationship with these experiences. You'll still face challenges, but you won't be destroyed by them. You'll still experience setbacks, but you won't be defined by them. The goal isn't to live a life without problems. The goal is to develop the kind of mental strength that can find peace and purpose, regardless of what problems arise. That's what the Stoics achieved, and that's what's available to you if you're willing to do the work. Right now, at this very moment, you have a choice. You can close this video and go back to the same mental patterns that brought you here. The same worry, the same overthinking, the same mental chaos that's been stealing your peace and limiting your potential. Or you can choose to begin the most important training of your life. The training of your mind. The Stoics believed that every moment was a new beginning. Every breath was a chance to choose wisdom over worry, clarity over confusion, peace over panic. You don't have to wait for the perfect time or the perfect circumstances. You can start right now with whatever habit called to you most strongly. Your future self is depending on the choice you make in this moment. The person you'll become over the next year, the peace you'll feel, the clarity you'll have, the strength you'll possess. All of that begins with what you choose to do right now. Will you remain trapped in the prison of your own thoughts, or will you begin the journey toward mental freedom? The choice is yours. But let me tell you what happens when you truly commit to this path. When you stop being a prisoner of your own mind and start becoming its master. When you stop reacting to life and start responding with wisdom. When you stop drowning in worry and start swimming in clarity. But here's something crucial that most people never understand. These 8 habits aren't just individual practices. They work together like a symphony. Morning reflection prepares your mind. Present moment awareness keeps you grounded throughout the day. The dichotomy of control focuses your energy on what matters. Negative visualization builds resilience. Evening reflection processes experience into wisdom. Disciplined desire eliminates resistance to reality. Philosophical detachment frees you from desperate attachment. And obstacle reframing transforms every challenge into growth. When these habits combine in your daily life, something magical happens. You stop living in the future prison of what might happen. You stop dwelling in the past dungeon of what already happened. You start living in the present moment, where your actual power resides, where your real life is happening, where peace actually exists. Let what this looks like in real me paint you a picture of life. You wake up tomorrow morning, and instead of immediately grabbing your phone to flood your mind with chaos, you sit quietly for 10 minutes. You ask yourself what you can control today. You prepare mentally for potential challenges. You remind yourself of your values. Your day begins with intention instead of reaction. Throughout the day, when your mind starts spinning into worry about a presentation next week, you catch it. You bring yourself back to this moment. You focus on preparing well instead of catastrophizing about failure. When someone treats you rudely, instead of ruminating for hours about what you should have said, you remember the dichotomy of control. Their behavior belongs to them. Your response belongs to you. When you face a setback, instead of spiraling into despair, you ask what this obstacle is trying to teach you, how it might redirect you toward something better, what strength it's building in you that you didn't know you needed. When evening comes, instead of collapsing into mindless entertainment, you reflect on the day. What went well? what you learned, how you grew. This isn't fantasy. This is what happens when you train your mind with the same dedication athletes train their bodies. But here's what nobody tells you about this journey. It's not always easy. There will be days when you forget to practice, days when your old patterns feel stronger than your new habits, days when you question whether any of this actually works. The Stoics faced these same doubts. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not because he was perfectly wise, but because he was constantly reminding himself to apply Stoic principles. Even the Emperor of Rome had to work daily to maintain his mental discipline. Even the most powerful man in the world had to practice staying grounded in reality instead of getting lost in worry. That should comfort you. You're not trying to become perfect. You're trying to become stronger. You're not trying to eliminate all negative emotions. You're trying to develop the skill to experience them without being controlled by them. You're not trying to control everything that happens to you. You're trying to master your responses to everything that happens to you. And here's the beautiful truth about this path. Every time you choose wisdom over worry, you get stronger. Every time you focus on what you can control instead of what you can't, you become more powerful. Every time you find opportunity in obstacles instead of being defeated by them, you develop unshakable resilience. But let's talk about what this actually feels like when it starts working. When you've been practicing these habits for weeks or months, and they begin to transform how your mind operates, you'll notice something strange happening. The things that used to send you into mental tailspins barely register as problems anymore. Traffic jams become opportunities to practice patience. Criticism becomes information instead of devastation. Uncertainty becomes adventure instead of anxiety. Failure becomes education instead of evidence of your worthlessness. Rejection becomes redirection instead of proof that you're unlovable. Your mind starts operating from a place of calm confidence instead of frantic desperation. You stop needing everything to go perfectly for you to be okay. You stop requiring other people's approval for your self-worth. You stop demanding that life conform to your expectations and start appreciating what life actually offers. This is what the Stoics called freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences. The freedom to remain peaceful regardless of what circumstances you face. The freedom to choose your responses instead of being controlled by your reactions. The freedom to find meaning and purpose even in difficulty. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They expect this transformation to happen overnight. They practice morning reflection for 3 days and wonder why they're still anxious. They try present moment awareness for a week and get frustrated that their mind still wanders. They attempt negative visualization once and decide it's not working because they don't immediately feel fearless. The Stoics understood something that our instant gratification culture has forgotten. Real change happens slowly, then suddenly. You practice consistently for weeks or months with only small improvements. Then one day you realize that you handled a crisis with complete calm. You navigated a difficult conversation with wisdom instead of emotion. You faced a major disappointment without being crushed by it. That's when you understand that the habits have been working all along, building strength you couldn't see, developing resilience you couldn't feel, creating neural pathways that support peace instead of panic. The transformation was happening beneath the surface before it became visible in your daily experience. This is why commitment matters more than perfection. The Stoic who practices imperfectly for months will develop more mental strength than the person who practices perfectly for a few days, then gives up. Consistency beats intensity. Progress beats perfection. Showing up beats giving up. And here's something profound that happens when you truly embrace this philosophy. You stop being afraid of your own mind. Think about how revolutionary that is. Most people are terrorized by their own thoughts. They're afraid to be alone with themselves because they know the mental chaos that awaits. They need constant distraction, constant stimulation, constant external validation to avoid confronting the storm inside their heads. But when you develop Stoic mental habits, you become comfortable with your own mind. Silence becomes peaceful instead of threatening. Solitude becomes restful instead of anxious. Your thoughts become tools you can use instead of weapons turned against you. Your mind becomes your ally instead of your enemy. You start to understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote about the citadel of the self. There's a place inside you that external circumstances cannot touch, a core of peace that doesn't depend on everything going right, a source of strength that doesn't require other people's approval, a foundation of worth that doesn't crumble when you make mistakes. This citadel isn't something you have to build from nothing. It already exists within you. The Stoic practices simply clear away the debris that's been covering it. The worry, the overthinking, the desperate attachment, the resistance to reality. When you remove these obstacles, you discover the unshakable peace that was there all along. But let me share something with you that goes deeper than techniques or practices. The real transformation happens when you realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the consciousness that experiences emotions. You are not your circumstances. You are the person who responds in identity, is what sepair to circumstances. This shift dates temporary improvement from lasting transformation. When you see yourself as someone who worries, you'll always return to worry. When you see yourself as someone who overthinks, you'll always return to overthinking. But when you see yourself as the observer of worry and overthinking, you gain the power to choose different responses. The Stoics understood this distinction perfectly. They didn't try to eliminate difficult thoughts and emotions. They developed the skill to observe them without being controlled by them. Like clouds passing through the sky, like weather systems moving through the atmosphere. Present, but temporary. Real, but not defining. When you truly grasp this, everything changes. You can feel anxiety without being an anxious person. You can experience sadness without being a depressed person. You can have worried thoughts without being a war, but they don't define you. They're here. The experiences pass through you, inform you, but they don't control you. This is the ultimate freedom that Stoicism offers. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of choice in how you relate to difficulty. Not the elimination of challenging emotions, but the development of skills to navigate them with wisdom. Not a life without problems, but a mind equipped to find growth in every problem. And here's what happens when you develop this kind of mental freedom. You become the kind of person others are drawn to. Not because your life is perfect, but because your peace doesn't depend on perfection. Not because you never face challenges, but because challenges don't define your character. Not because you're always happy, but because your happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances. People sense this stability. They feel your groundedness. They're attracted to the calm confidence that comes from inner work rather than outer achievement. You become a source of strength for others because you've developed real, most importantly, you become free strength within yourself, but perhaps to pursue what actually matters to you. When you're not constantly battling your own mind, you have energy for meaningful work. When you're not paralyzed by worry about outcomes, you can take risks that lead to growth. When you're not desperately seeking approval from others, you can follow your own path with courage. The Stoics didn't practice these habits to withdraw from life. They practiced them to engage more fully with life. Marcus Aurelius used his mental discipline to lead an empire. Seneca used his philosophical detachment to write profound literature. Epictetus used his inner freedom to teach others how to find their own liberation. Your version of this engagement will be uniquely yours. Maybe you'll use your mental clarity to build something meaningful. Maybe you'll use your emotional stability to love more deeply. Maybe you'll use your resilience to help others through their own struggles. The specific form doesn't matter. What matters is that you'll be free to choose based on your values rather than your fears. This is what awaits you on the other side of consistent practice. Not perfection, but power. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of skills to meet any challenge. Not a mind that never worries, but a mind that knows how to return to peace. Not a life without storms, but an inner fortress that no storm can shake. The ancient Stoics discovered these truths through their own struggles, their own practices, their own commitment to mental training. They faced wars, plagues, exile, loss, and death with dignity because they had developed unshakable inner strength. That same strength is available to you. Those same practices are waiting for you. That same transformation is possible for you, but it requires a decision, not just an intellectual agreement that these ideas sound good, but a commitment to daily practice. Not just reading about Stoicism, but living it. Not just understanding the concepts, but embodying the habits until they become as natural as breathing. The question isn't whether you have time for this practice. The question is whether you have time for the alternative. How much time do you currently spend worrying? How much energy do you waste overthinking? How much of your life passes by while you're trapped in mental chaos? The time you invest in training your mind will give you back exponentially more time by freeing you from the prison of destructive thought patterns. The question isn't whether you're capable of this transformation. The question is whether you're willing to commit to it. The Stoics weren't superhuman. They were ordinary people who made an extraordinary commitment to mental discipline. They chose the difficult path of inner work because they understood it led to lasting freedom. Right now, at this moment, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar territory of worry and overthinking. It's comfortable because it's known, even though it's painful. The other path leads toward mental freedom and inner peace. It's challenging because it requires consistent effort, but it promises genuine transformation. The Stoics would tell you that this choice will define not just your next week or month, but the entire trajectory of your mental life. Every moment of peace you experience in the future depends on the discipline you develop starting today. Every crisis you navigate with wisdom instead of panic will be made possible by the habits you build right now. Your future self is already waiting for you on the other side of this commitment. The version of you that remains calm under pressure. The version of you that thinks clearly in chaos. The version of you that finds opportunity in every obstacle. That person exists as a potential right now, waiting for you to choose the path that leads to their reality. The choice is in your hands, but understand this. The Stoics didn't just practice these habits when they felt like it. They practiced them especially when they didn't feel like it. When Marcus Aurelius was exhausted from leading an empire, when Seneca was facing political pressure, when Epictetus was dealing with physical pain, that's when the habits mattered most. That's when the transformation happened. Because here's what separates those who achieve mental freedom from those who remain trapped in their own thoughts. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not perfect circumstances. It's the willingness to show up for your own growth, even when your mind is screaming that it's pointless, even when you can't see immediate results, even when every part of you wants to quit. Your mind will test your commitment. It will whisper that these practices are too simple to work. It will insist that your problems are too complex for ancient philosophy. It will convince you that you're different, that you're broken in ways that can't be fixed by morning reflection or present moment awareness. This is your mind protecting its current patterns, fighting to maintain the familiar chaos it knows. But every time you practice anyway, every time you choose the discipline over the distraction, every time you return to the present moment instead of spiraling into worry, you're proving to yourself that you are stronger than your circumstances. You're demonstrating that you have power your mind didn't know existed. You're building evidence that transformation is not only possible, but inevitable, with consistent practice. And here's something beautiful that happens along this journey. The very obstacles that used to defeat you become the training ground for your strength. The difficult people who used to ruin your day become teachers of patience. The unexpected changes that used to send you into panic become opportunities to practice acceptance. The failures that used to devastate you become stepping stones to wisdom. This is what the Stoics meant when they said that the wise person welcomes whatever comes. Not because they're masochistic or indifferent to pain, but because they've learned to extract value from every experience. They've developed the skill to find growth in comfort and difficulty alike. They've trained themselves to see life not as something that happens to them, but as something they participate in with conscious choice. Think about the person you were when you started watching this video. The mental patterns you were caught in. The worry that was consuming your peace. The overthinking that was stealing your sleep. Now imagine the person you could become 6 months from now if you commit to these practices. The calm confidence you could develop. The mental clarity you could achieve. The inner peace that could become your default state instead of your rare exception. That transformation isn't guaranteed, but it is available. The Stoics proved it was possible. Millions of people throughout history have proven it works. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that consistent mental practices literally rewire your brain. The path is clear. The methods are proven. The only variable is your commitment. But let me warn you about something that will try to derail you. Your old identity will fight back. The part of you that has always been the worrier, the overthinker, the person who gets overwhelmed by uncertainty. That identity will feel threatened as you start to change. It will create stories about why you should quit, why this isn't working, why you should is normal. This is expected, try something else instead. This is actually a sign that the practices are working. Your old patterns are losing their grip, and they're fighting to maintain control. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, learning to want what serves your growth instead of what feels comfortable. Sometimes growth feels uncomfortable precisely because you're breaking free from limiting patterns. When this resistance arises, and it will, remember why you started. Remember the mental prison you were living in. Remember the sleepless nights spent worrying about things you couldn't control. Remember the energy you wasted overthinking conversations and replaying scenarios. Remember the peace you lost to anxiety about futures that never happened and pasts you couldn't change. You started this journey because something inside you knew there was a better way to live. Something deeper than your worried thoughts recognized that you were meant for mental freedom, not mental slavery. That knowing hasn't disappeared. It's still there, waiting for you to choose it again and again, until choosing wisdom becomes as automatic as choosing worry used to be. And here's what happens when you push through that resistance. When you practice these habits, even when your mind tells you they're pointless, you discover something the Stoics knew thousands of years ago. You discover that you are not at the mercy of your thoughts and emotions. You are their master, their director, their conscious observer who can choose which ones to follow and which ones to let pass by like clouds in the sky. This realization changes everything. When you know you can observe anxiety without becoming anxious, you're no longer afraid of anxious thoughts. When you know you can witness worry without becoming worried, you're no longer terrorized by worried thoughts. When you understand that you are the awareness behind all mental activity, you're no longer imprisoned by any particular mental pattern. This is the deepest teaching of Stoicism. Not that life becomes easy, but that you become equipped for whatever life brings. Not that problems disappear, but that your relationship with problems transforms completely. Not that you never feel difficult emotions, but that difficult emotions no longer control your choices or define your character. But perhaps most importantly, you discover that peace was never something you had to achieve, or earn, or deserve. It was always your covered over by layers natural state, simply of mental activity. The worry, the overthinking, the desperate attachment to outcomes. These were learned patterns that could be unlearned. Underneath them was always the calm awareness that is your true nature. The Stoic practices don't create this peace. They reveal it. They don't build inner strength from nothing. They uncover the strength that was always there. They don't manufacture wisdom. They clear away the mental noise that was preventing you from accessing the wisdom you already possess. This is why Marcus Aurelius could find tranquility in the midst of war. This is why Seneca could maintain his dignity facing execution. This is why Epictetus could teach freedom while wearing chains. They had discovered the unshakable foundation that exists within every human being. They had learned to access the peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. That same foundation exists within you. That same peace is available to you. That same strength is waiting to be discovered through your own committed practice. Not someday when you have more time. Not eventually when your life is less complicated. Right now, in this moment, with whatever circumstances you're currently facing. The ancient Stoics faced uncertainty about the future just like you do. They dealt with difficult people just like you do. They experienced loss, disappointment, fear, and confusion just like you do. The difference wasn't in their circumstances. The difference was in their response to circumstances, and that response was trained, developed, strengthened through daily practice of the very habits we've explored together. Your response can be trained, too. Your mind can be disciplined. Your inner peace can be developed. Your mental freedom can be achieved, not through wishful thinking or positive affirmations, but through the patient, consistent application of proven principles, through showing up for your own growth day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment. The Stoics understood that this was the most important work a human being could do, not because it's easy, but because it's essential, not because it guarantees a life without problems, but because it develops the capacity to find meaning and purpose, regardless of what problems arise. Not because it makes you better than others, but because it makes you the fullest version of yourself. This is your invitation to begin that work. Not tomorrow when you feel more motivated, not next week when you have a better plan, not next year when your life is more settled. Right now, in this moment, with the very next choice you make, the choice to practice morning reflection tomorrow, the choice to notice when your mind wanders into worry and gently bring it back to the present, the choice to focus on what you can control instead of what you cannot. Each of these choices is small. Each practice session is brief. Each habit takes just minutes to implement, but their cumulative effect over time is nothing short of revolutionary. You become a different kind of person, the kind who remains calm in crisis, the kind who thinks clearly under pressure, the kind who finds opportunity in every obstacle and growth in every challenge. The Stoics called this the good life. Not a life without difficulty, but a life lived with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline, regardless of what difficulties arise. A life where your peace doesn't depend on external validation. A life where your strength doesn't require perfect circumstances. A life where your happiness comes from within and cannot be taken away by anything outside your control. This good life is not reserved for philosophers or emperors or people with perfect circumstances. It's available to anyone willing to train their mind with the same dedication athletes train their bodies. It's accessible to anyone ready to choose growth over comfort, discipline over distraction, wisdom over worry. The question that remains is simple. Will you choose to begin this transformation today? Or will you remain trapped in the mental patterns that brought you to this video in the first place? Will you commit to the daily practices that lead to freedom? Or will you continue the daily habits that lead to suffering? Will you trust the wisdom of the Stoics who faced every challenge you face and found a way to peace? Or will you trust the voice in your head that says, change is impossible? Your future self is watching this moment. The version of you that could exist 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, if you make the commitment to mental discipline. That person is peaceful where you are anxious, confident where you are uncertain, grounded where you are scattered, strong where you feel weak. But that person doesn't exist by accident. They exist because of choices made in moments exactly like this one. Choices to practice when practice feels pointless. Choices to persist when progress seems impossible. Choices to trust ancient wisdom over modern worry. Choices to become who you're capable of being instead of remaining who you've always been. The Stoics are waiting for you to join their ranks, not as perfect beings, but as committed practitioners, not as people without problems, but as people with skills to handle any problem, not as individuals who never worry, but as individuals who know how to return to peace when worry arises. The practices are simple. The path is clear. The results are proven. Everything you need has been shared. The only thing left is your decision. The decision to begin. The decision to commit. The decision to trust that you are capable of the mental transformation that seemed impossible when you started watching this video, but now feels not just possible, but inevitable. Your mind is waiting to be trained. Your peace is waiting to be discovered. Your strength is waiting to be developed. Your freedom is waiting to be claimed. The ancient Stoics showed you the way. The question is whether you'll walk the path. The time for thinking about it is over. The time for wishing things were different has passed. Right now, in this very moment, you have the power to choose a different path. You can choose to become the person who no longer drowns in their own thoughts. You can choose to develop the kind of mental strength that turns every challenge into training. You can choose to build the inner fortress that no external storm can shake. But here's what separates those who transform from those who remain trapped. It's not reading about these practices. It's not understanding them intellectually. It's not agreeing that they sound good. It's implementing them daily, consistently, relentlessly, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when your mind screams that it's pointless, especially when progress feels invisible. The Stoics didn't become mentally free by accident. They didn't stumble into wisdom. They trained their minds like warriors train for battle. They practiced these habits when they were tired, when they were discouraged, when they doubted whether any of it mattered. They understood that mental discipline isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built in moments of resistance. The ancient Stoics knew something that our modern world has forgotten. Peace isn't found in perfect circumstances. It's found in perfect responses to imperfect circumstances. You now have the 8 habits that can transform your relationship with worry and overthinking forever. But knowledge without action is just entertainment. The choice is yours. Will you remain imprisoned by your thoughts, or will you claim the mental freedom that's been waiting for you all along? Start with one habit. Start today. Start now.